So for my first sprint, I was focusing on doing some more expert need finding to understand what experts consider good heuristics for good or bad code, what choices they make when they look at professional examples. So I edited an interview guide and conducted three interviews with web developers to get a sense of how they use professional code examples and what they look for when they compare two pieces of code that kind of do the same thing. And so what I learned was really that everyone has sort of a similar workflow when it comes to creating a component from scratch. It's usually the HTML markup first and then the CSS. Um, but when it comes to when you introduce, I think, example websites, no one really copies or pastes, which I thought was interesting. Mostly people want to copy the general structure in some sort of smart or informed way. And they're mostly concerned with the clutter that comes from adapting original code and making sure that fits into their own projects a little bit more seamlessly. And of course, with front end development, people are pretty opinionated about how they write HTML and CSS, what sorts of things matter to them, if that's semantic tags, the names that you give classes and IDs. But in general, people cared more about big picture decisions, the general structure for HTML sort of above all else. Um, and then some sort of nice to haves would be seeing maybe current trends or things or practices like using Flexbox in CSS or using more HTML tags that store metadata to make websites more accessible. And so after doing that, I also started building out some mockups from last quarter. So this is sort of what I initially had, which was being able to search for components, getting those comparisons, and also a more stripped down and simplified version of that structure, as well as some crowdsourced examples or opinions from professional developers about why certain preferences or strategies might be better than others. And so this is sort of what the final or the current thing looks like. And in the meantime, I've also just been sort of grabbing more code for example websites that we'd want to use in the future for a pilot study. And again, we'll just sort of pull the code and eventually we'll have sort of a more annotated interface here. And finally, I spent a decent amount of time solidifying and writing out some design goals and design arguments a little bit more explicitly. And so really thinking of this to be named platform as a hub for surfacing common practices for HTML components across professional websites and sharing strategies and or preferences for front-end implementations of common components as related to the structure of HTML and CSS. And so I hope to, in the next sprint, sort of get feedback on both the design goal and some of these more specific design arguments about specific features like code simplification, component search, code annotation, user-submitted comments, and a crowdsourcing aspect to it. And again, sort of prioritize and iterate those features so that we can flesh out this cool name TBD platform.